Okay, I'm Giles Cross. Welcome to the next edition of Future Businesses Corporate Futures Interviews. I'm with Andrew Wilson. So I wonder if you'd like to introduce yourself to us, Andrew, and then we'll dive into our question list, please.
Well, certainly great to be with you. I'm Andrew Wilson. I'm the Global Director of Policy at the International Chamber of Commerce. We're a global business institution representing something in the region of 45 million businesses in over 100 countries.
Brilliant, thank you very much. We were just chatting before we kicked off our interview about work you've been doing in Ukraine. Obviously, I was going to kick off our question list by just asking you about the key business challenges and the geopolitical risks facing global corporates given what's going on in Ukraine. So perhaps it would be sensible if you could just give us an overview of that situation at the moment and just what the key challenges perhaps seem to be from a corporate perspective. I appreciate this is a complicated question and it's ever changing, isn't it? But perhaps if you can do your best, we can talk through that to begin with.
Most certainly. So it is most definitely complex and complicated, but I think what we see is three fundamental challenges from a business perspective. And none of what I'm about to say is to question the imposition of sanctions on Russia. We understand why the G7 and other economies have done that and done that forcefully.
Yeah, of course.
But I think the first issue is, I guess, the complexity and the uncertainty that the situation and the sanctions have caused. We're obviously seeing investor confidence, consumer confidence, and business confidence declining in a number of economies. Mm-hmm. And also, I think some uncertainty caused by the sanctions themselves. This is just such a fast-moving environment with different economies going in different directions. I think the second thing, which I guess is more systemic, is the extent to which this has revealed, I would say, the vulnerability of global value chains to certain geographies or countries that have dominant supply, particularly of raw materials. And I think that, more so than COVID, I would say, has prompted some pretty serious reflections within the business community about the merits of just-in-time models rather than and also diversification. And I think there will be a push, certainly within some geographies, towards localization or regionalization of supply. But I think perhaps most personally, the big thing that has come out in many of our discussions with businesses through our network is a recognition that this is the first major conflict or war that really is having to be addressed from a corporate perspective through an ESG lens. So this isn't just simply a matter of complying with sanctions. A lot more is expected of business. There are clearly reputational risks involved in terms of doing business with Russia. And many businesses, as a result, beyond the direct effect of any of the sanctions or export restrictions, are being forced to make very, very tough, in some instances, novel discussions about whether they stay in Russia, if they do stay in, on what terms, whether they disengage and how they do that in a responsible way. And the future question will be, assuming there is an end to the conflict, hopefully sometime soon, how do businesses responsibly re-engage with Russia, respectful of public opinion, respectful of human rights, respectful of the governance situation there. I think that's a very big and also very novel frontier that's been opened up.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. I think that's interesting. Now that leads into my next question. I was going to talk with you about 2 or 3 key drivers dominating the future of business, but I think you've hinted at ESG just when we're talking about Ukraine, and also to an extent localism and energy futures as well, I think, perhaps, and security of supply. Clearly, these all lead into overarching sustainability concerns to do with net zero and the future of corporates and everything they're doing in that space. So I feel as though we've almost linked these couple of questions in a bit here. It almost sounds as though these key drivers that the Ukraine situation has catalyzed, perhaps they were there anyway, but they've just been brought to the forefront in a very, right to the center of our lens, perhaps unexpectedly.
I think that's certainly true. I mean, I think you can see from an ESG perspective, the crisis pulling in 2 distinct directions. So firstly, we're probably going to see a significant increase in fossil fuel subsidies in the short term.
Yeah.
Our view is that that is absolutely probably necessary and certainly understandable if those are interventions governments want to make. But there clearly needs to be some thinking about how you ultimately wind those back. So that I think that there has to be a framework around that. But I think in terms of some of the other ESG dynamics, I think it will be an accelerator, if anything. And I think one interesting thing we see is around security of supply and self-sufficiency in the energy space. Companies, as a result of what we're seeing happen in the energy markets now, partly before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, most certainly after, looking at how they can become self-sufficient in their operations through solar facilities next to major production plants, for instance. So I think that will be an accelerator in some respects, but I think there is a short-term issue around fossil fuel use, fossil fuel subsidies. But I think we've been very clear that there needs to be a framework and a roadmap for actually working through those. This can't be a crisis that simply pushes to one side, the climate crisis and the implementation of the Paris Agreement.
Sure, fantastic, thank you. Yes, so clearly sustainability is a massive part of tomorrow's corporate futures. We were just interested to discuss within the space of the Ukraine situation what corporates might be doing to future-proof for a greener, more profitable tomorrow. And you were just going to talk us through some of those key issues, I think.
I think certainly if you view this through the lens of the Ukraine crisis, reducing reliance on fossil fuels is certainly absolutely essential. And I think we will see, as I mentioned earlier, drive towards energy self-sufficiency in terms of solar, wind, etc. installations around key plants. I think the other thing to think about is global value chains and the stability of those vital networks. And I don't think this is a crisis that is going to presage whatever certain politicians may say, complete localization of economic activity. But certainly businesses need to be much more thoughtful about security of supply, stability of value chains. And I think within that, there is a very, very important ESG element. So, how do you ensure that human rights are respected through supply chains? And I think that is something that we need to see much more attention on from corporates going forward.